so happy to join you today. I'm going to be reading a portion of a devotional from my most recent book, Heartfelt Holidays, which is just a really wonderful way to prepare our hearts for the season of Christmas. Starting in Thanksgiving, this book of devotionals leads us through daily devotionals, focusing first on gratitude, and now moving into somewhat of an Advent schedule. So week 1 of the Christmas series, we are focusing on hope. And if you've ever been in a season of waiting, or maybe just a painful season that you've been praying, looking for change, looking for God to act on your behalf, today's reading is for you. I love the psalm that we're going to dive into. So I just wanted to share a portion of today's devotional. I'm in the first week of the Christmas chapter, maybe, of this book, and I'm on day 2, which is titled Hope in Silence. And it begins by asking, have you ever found yourself waiting a long time in prayer? I have. What were you praying for? And how did you feel during that time? Have you ever had moments of feeling forgotten, discouraged, or maybe hopeless, or angry at situations or circumstances that maybe were out of your control? I sure have. And the next portion of this book has us read Psalm 13. So I'd love to share Psalm 13 with you today. And listen to this psalm. I want you to, when you hear the word enemy, maybe in your mind switch that word with problems, right? Because oftentimes we don't pray necessarily about an enemy we might feel we have, but we do pray about problems, things that hold us back, things that steal our joy, things that keep us from living our best lives for God's glory, filled with joy, filled with the peace that God wants us to experience. How long, O Lord? Have you ever asked him that question? Will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts? Wow, maybe you are like me and sometimes find yourself wrestling with your thoughts. And before you know it, your mood has shifted, your mind is somewhere else, and you're wrestling with thoughts, maybe memories, maybe difficult feelings. How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and every day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy, how long will my problems triumph over me? Look at me and answer, O Lord, my God. I love that. Just straight up, God, will you just answer me? Finally, please? Look at me and answer me, O Lord, my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. My enemy will say, my problems will declare, I have overcome him. And my foes will rejoice when I fall. But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord, for he has been good to me. So digging back into today's devotional, it then goes on to ask, have you ever felt similar to the emotions expressed in this psalm? Notice how David shifts his focus in the final verses. Where does he ultimately place his hope? But I will rejoice in you, Lord. I will sing to you. You have been good to me. He shifts his focus to the goodness of God, and when we shift our focus to really focusing on gratitude, on the ways that God has been good to us, our lives are filled with so many components, right? So many different things that could make us feel whole and happy. That might be health, that might be financial blessings, that might be a relationship that's a blessing, a marriage, a significant other. It might be where you live and things you get to experience. But when one of these things is lacking, we tend to focus on that. Whatever's lacking, right? But there are so many components in your life that you can count as a blessing. So David shifts his focus on the good, all the good that God has bestowed upon him, away from his problems and onto the good. God's people have often experienced long seasons of waiting in silence from him. And this is where we dig into in this Christmas devotional. this long season of waiting, the 400-year period of waiting. One of the most significant periods of silence was the 400 years between the books of Malachi and Matthew. During this time, no prophets spoke, and it might have seemed as though God had forgotten his people. However, a lot was happening that would set the stage for the New Testament, and this is what I love to read about. How it seemed like God was silent. God was nowhere. Nothing was happening. 400 years. This is such a long time. But in this amount of time, Judea was ruled by various foreign powers, from the Persians to the Romans, and the Old Testament was translated into Greek. This was the version most often quoted in the New Testament. There's so many things happened during this time, politically, with the spread of this language, and God was setting the scene. Things were happening. Though it may have seemed like God was absent, he wasn't. He remembered his people and the promises he had made. I'm going to skip a bit of today's devotional and get right into Micah 5:2-4. Okay, so this is before this 400 period of silence. And listen to the prophecy. Listen to the hope that's given here. But you, O Bethlehem, only a small village among all the people of Judah, yet a ruler of Israel whose origins are in the distant past, will come from you on my behalf. The people of Israel will be abandoned to their enemies until the woman in labor gives birth. Then at last his fellow countrymen will return from exile to their own land, and he will stand to lead his flock with the Lord's strength in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. Then his people will live there undisturbed, for he will be highly honored around the world. And then we skip to Matthew, and Matthew references this passage when he recounts the birth of Jesus. Jesus was born in Bethlehem, in Judea, during the reign of King Herod. Where is the Messiah supposed to be born? In Bethlehem, they say, for this is what the prophet wrote. So we see that these passages come together to show us that God keeps his promises, even when it feels like he's silent. If God feels like he's silent to you right now, can you just remember that he has promises for you? I have plans for you. Plans for a hope and a future, plans to use you, to be a blessing to others, plans to give you hope and peace and joy. All of that, all of these are promises from God. They're promises for you. So when God feels silent, remember, he has given you promises, and he will see those promises through. You got to follow him, right? You got to trust him. The prophecy of the Messiah's birth, first given to Micah, was fulfilled in Matthew. We can trust that God's yet unfulfilled promises will also come to pass. As you reflect on the 400 years of silence between the Old and New Testaments, consider your own seasons of waiting. Has there been a time in your life when God seemed silent? Is that time right now? Are there some ways that right now God seems silent? You can't figure out what it is he's doing, all the things behind the scenes, all the pieces maybe he's putting into place, all the ways he's acting in your heart, maybe growing and shaping and developing your character or the character of other people in your life. Looking back, can you see now how God had been working in your life in certain situations, even when it wasn't clear at the time? I can look back and see ways that even in the midst of pain and discouragement and heartbreak, God was working in me and in my life in ways that he couldn't accomplish if it weren't for those valleys. How might your past experiences of waiting help you navigate current situations where you feel like you are still waiting for God to respond? So I just wanted to share today's devotional with you, giving you a little bit of hope. God sometimes feels silent. We don't always understand what he's doing. And sometimes it's hard to feel his presence in our lives. Let me just remind you, when you come and spend time with the Lord, he will spend time with you. And sometimes when God feels silent, we have to ask ourselves, if God's quiet right now, is it him or is it me? Right? And maybe by putting in a little bit of extra time with the Lord, 10 minutes every morning, can you commit to that? Maybe you'll feel his presence all the more. Maybe you'll start to understand. Maybe he'll speak to you through his word, the ways that he is working in your life. So I just want to give you that piece of encouragement today. Even if God feels silent, even if you don't understand, he's at work. His promises are trustworthy. So I will come on live. I will share as many of these as I possibly can, as fits in my schedule. We will post them to my Instagram feed, as well as most likely to YouTube, so you can always find them there. So if you haven't grabbed a copy, maybe grab a copy. Otherwise, just maybe join me on these lives. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.